This is Stacey McKibben with the Master Communicator podcast, where CEOs, senior leaders, and C-suite executives share their advice. It's 6 questions in 9 minutes because the best leaders know how to share their ideas concisely and quickly. Let's jump right in. Question number 1. In a few sentences, tell me who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Rehana Nathoo, and I run an impact investing consulting firm called Spectrum Impact. We basically help asset owners and managers, so that means corporates, family offices, other private actors, figure out how to build their approach in impact investing.
That's amazing. How long have you been doing that?
So the firm itself has been up and running for about 2 years. Sometimes it feels like 10 years. Sometimes it feels like 2 days, but
Right.
all right, I've been working in this space for the better part of a decade. Hard to imagine.
That's great. Well, I'll be really excited to kind of hear your perspective. And I always love giving a little shout out to my ladies because I think the female perspective is just a little bit different. So I appreciate having you.
Oh gosh.
Question 2, what's the best thing about leading people from your perspective?
Yeah, it's such a thoughtful question because now more than ever, when we're all so far apart, leadership is even more critical. I would actually say it's diversity, but probably in a slightly different conception of how we think about diversity. As a minority woman, some of the conversations around diversity can tend to ruffle one's feathers. I think sometimes we go down a pathway that can really start to tokenize people of color, right? So all of a sudden, all of the same kinds of people of color are fighting for one position. And it runs the risk over the long term of bringing the bar down for what should be merit-based decisions. And that's meaningful to me because I think there is, structural issues with marginalizing some groups of women, but for the most part, there's just advantages that we don't talk about. So for me, diversity is entirely about leadership, training, expertise, perspective. And I have the unbelievable pleasure of having a motley crew of 3 that come to this space from everywhere that you could possibly imagine. And I'm sure, like a lot of other people that think through this question, see the benefit in the end product 100% of the time. So for me, the leadership challenge and interest is actually creating a team of truly diverse people. And that's just a joy. Also, the learning curve is unbelievable, right? You're constantly learning something new.
I can imagine, especially having all those different perspectives at the table and really collaborating. I mean, I can imagine the ideas and the fun,
Totally.
And even the head-to-head, which would be really dynamic and interesting, to watch and participate in.
Totally.
I often hear from other leaders that business would be great if it weren't for that pesky people part.
Right.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's very timely because I would say that a lot of my journey into this chapter was actually a byproduct of wanting to run away from a little bit of that. You spend, a good 10 years in a row moving from institution to institution, you start to realize how much of your ability to do things has to do with people. And sometimes it has to do with the human parts of people, right? So
Right.
Politics, morality, ethic, however you're feeling that day. So I get it. I get the lamentation. And I think I was also moving to a place where it would be so great not to deal with people. And then I built a consulting company and threw that all out the window. I think for me, the best way to operationalize how to do it without losing your head is to think about people similarly to how we think about investment, right? Which is this beautiful trade-off between risk and return. People are not so different. Everyone has a risk tolerance and everyone is looking for a goal. And I think for me, trying to find people's sweet spot in the what do you need and what do you want actually created quite a bit more empathy than I naturally had available to me. And so thinking about people as compromise, which I'm sure my kindergarten teacher told me at some point, and I just blissfully ignored it, that to me is actually the way through it. Otherwise, it's just impossible not to take everything personally.
Yeah, and just beat your head up against the wall when
Totally.
things don't necessarily go the way that you envision them being, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we miss some of the wins along the way when we think about it that way too, right?
Right. Yeah, totally.
The opportunities. What other successful business leaders like yourself should be on the show? As we think about other voices that are out there and making powerful impacts, who else besides yourself should we be paying attention to?
One of the real gifts, and I truly mean that, of being part of the impact investing industry is that we could probably spend 3.5 hours just on that list, right? It's just a compendium of really thoughtful, interesting people. For the sake of brevity, I'll list a couple, but I think we could go on and on. So
Sure.
the people that I really turn to and listen to are people that exemplify, both in their work, but in their personal interaction, a great amount of authenticity and realness. So Monique Aiken over at Mission Investors Exchange is pretty much the perfect example of compassionate, authentic leadership, which I think is really hard to find in this day and age. Will Jacobson over at Kiva is a good example of living your life not too seriously, and the ability to use humor, I think, in tackling really thoughtful challenges. Sheila Hurling over at the Beck Center, who was my boss and my former employee, is a great example, especially as a female leader, but a leader in general, of lifting people up as you rise. And this idea, right, that as you climb the ladder, you can take people with you, which is so unbelievably rare to find. And then there's a dynamic duo in the impact investing space, Eric Stevenson over at Align Impact and Chintan Panchal at RPCK, that are great examples of building businesses and then building other people at the same time. More often than not, you do find entrepreneurs feel forced to focus on themselves, rightly so, right? They're trying to build a business and thrive and rise. And that's two examples of two individuals, I think, that have more than enough to share with everybody. And then I'd probably round out the list with Jess Hussein and Jess Tomlin, who are co-CEOs of the Equality Fund, who are a living example that co-leadership can happen in the most gracious and professional way. And all of those people have just had a profound impact on me. So I feel pretty grateful.
Wow, you do have a great network. You know, as we talk about, we're the combination of the people we spend the most time with. So to me, this is one of the most important questions out there, because it really challenges us to think about who is in our network and who else could we be adding with some intentionality to further, you know, garden our minds appropriately, right?
Yeah. Well, I also appreciate that, like, no, exactly. And it's what I love about the way that you phrase that is that it reminds us to lift each other up. I mean, it's just so hard when you're trying to build a business not to focus on your own outcomes, but massive kudos, because now we're thinking about each other.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
What piece of advice about communication would you give to other leaders?
This one is great. It's not a Rehana original. I think I've borrowed it from my partner, but I think it comes down to simplicity is key. When I was starting in this space, I thought, like a lot of people do, that the more jargon and technical language that I use, the more seriously I'll be taken. And I think in the course of building a consulting company that basically is a translation business, so translating investment principles to an impact audience or impact outcomes to an investment audience, it's just about translation. And using simple, clear language is the best way to indicate that you actually truly understand something. So if I could go back and shake 21-year-old Rehana and think a little bit about what to do differently, I think getting comfortable with simple, clear language is actually the best sign of comprehension.
Love that. You know, can you explain it to a fifth grader?
Yes, exactly. Truer words.
All right. Magic question number 6. Tell us about your favorite boss or teacher. Who's really influenced you?
Yeah. Again, like, this is a Sophie's choice of just incredible people in life. So I'm going to cheat and run a little bit of a list again, because I think I'm one of those unbelievably fortunate students that just got like that laundry list of teachers that actually cared. So for me, the 6th grade was Mrs. Purcell. 8th grade was Mrs. Sears. And then I had 2 teachers in high school, Mr. Rose and Mr. Falkenberg, that would probably be like my co-conspirators in the Captain Planet that is my life, right? Like, everybody has their own magic ring, and together we're infinitely powerful. But I think what they had in common, to be totally honest, was that they never treated me like a kid. I don't think there's anything more frustrating to a 13-year-old, highly precocious young girl than to feel like, than to feel like life is just not important. And they never did that. And they managed to empower and uplift while also being unbelievably respectful. And that, to me, is the ultimate in leadership.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate so much having you on the show. And I think all of your ideas and insights were just so articulately, so well said, right? How can people find you if they want to reach out or learn more or get to know you better?
Yes, of course. They can find us on Twitter at Rehana Nathoo, or via our website, which is spectrum-impact.com.
I love it. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show. This is Stacy McKibben with the Master Communicator Podcast. For more ideas and insights, please do go check us out at www.concilioteam.com. We look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care.